My name is Mark Grayson. I'm 37 years old, a lieutenant in the United States Army, and I just returned home from a 9-month deployment in Iraq. I was supposed to come back to my wife, my 2 kids, and a house full of life and warmth. Instead, I unlocked the front door and stepped into silence. The living room was empty. Not just quiet empty. No couch, no pictures, not even the faint smell of my wife's perfume that usually lingered near the entryway. The toys that used to scatter across the floor like landmines were gone. Even the framed photo of our family from the 4th of July barbecue had vanished from the mantel. For a second, I thought maybe I'd walked into the wrong house. But no, the dent in the wall from where my son once flung a plastic dinosaur in a tantrum was still there. I stood frozen, still wearing my uniform, boots dusty with sand from halfway across the world. My duffel bag dropped to the floor with a dull thud, the only sound in the entire house. I called out her name, then the kids. No answer. I moved from room to room like a ghost retracing a life that had been scrubbed clean of me. The closets were empty, the drawers were pulled out, even the dog's food bowl was missing. On the kitchen table sat a white envelope with my name scrawled on the front. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I opened it and read words that didn't feel real. She was leaving. She had moved out. She'd taken the kids. There was no apology, no explanation, just a statement of fact and a line at the bottom that said she'd filed for divorce 2 months ago. She hadn't even waited for me to come home. I leaned against the counter, trying to breathe. My brain felt slow, like I was still underwater or maybe in Iraq, and this was some nightmare I'd blink out of. But I was home, and home didn't exist anymore. I picked up my phone and checked the family savings account. 0. Every cent was gone. She had cleared it out. My name was still listed, but the balance was empty, just like the house. I walked outside, hoping maybe one of the neighbors had seen something or had a clue. But the Johnsons weren't home, and the kid across the street was too busy playing video games to even notice I'd been gone for almost a year. The sun was setting, and everything looked normal. Except me. I was the only thing that had changed. Or maybe I was the only one who hadn't. That night, I slept in my car, parked in the driveway of what used to be my life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared up through the windshield at the stars, wondering how it was possible to feel so abandoned by people you gave everything to. I missed my kids. I missed their bedtime giggles and the way they used to fight over who got to sit on my lap first. Now they were somewhere else, with her. And some other man. She didn't even wait until I came back in one piece. She made her decision while I was halfway across the world, trying to stay alive. Maybe I should have seen it coming. The short replies to my letters, the missed video calls, but I chalked it up to stress, to parenting alone. I never imagined she'd erase me from their lives. I spent years training to defend my country, to survive war zones, to protect strangers with my life. But nothing in all my service prepared me for this. Nothing could prepare you for walking into a home you built and realizing it's no longer yours, that you're no longer wanted. The war didn't end overseas. It followed you home. And this time, you didn't even know you were under attack. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was thick, like fog wrapping around my chest. I stood in the doorway, staring into the hollow shell of what used to be our home, and for a moment, I truly didn't know where I was. There were no shoes by the door, no school bags thrown on the floor. The welcome mat was gone, and the hall table, the one we used to keep pictures and birthday cards on, sat bare and dusty. I walked in slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, whatever was left would disappear too. The walls still had the faint outlines of where our family photos used to hang, but the frames were gone. The kitchen smelled like cardboard. Not food, not life. The refrigerator was unplugged. The pantry was empty. Even the spice rack had been taken. I opened a few drawers out of habit, but they only offered dust and that strange kind of loneliness that clings to abandoned places. I made my way to the living room and sat down on the floor where the couch used to be, knees bent, elbows resting on them, palms over my mouth. My breathing was loud in that kind of space. Too loud. Then I saw it. A white envelope on the kitchen table, all by itself. My name was scribbled across the front in her handwriting. I didn't even open it right away, just stared at it like it might burst into flames if I touched it. When I finally did, the words inside were short, cold. It was over. She had moved on. She didn't want to be with someone who was never home. She'd taken the kids with her. There was no apology, no fight, no emotion, just a cold summary of the facts. I went straight to the laptop we kept in the bedroom closet. It was still there, locked in the fireproof box. At least she didn't take that. I logged in to check our bank accounts. She hadn't just emptied the joint account. She drained the savings, too. Everything we had worked for, every deployment check I'd sent home, every bonus. Gone. My name was still on the account, but the number stared back at me like a joke. There was nothing left for me in that house. Not a note from my kids. Not a drawing. Not even a shirt left behind to smell or hold. It was like I had never existed in their lives. Like someone had walked in and erased me while I was halfway across the world. I wasn't angry, not then. I was just hollow. Like my body had come home, but the rest of me was still somewhere in the desert, trying to survive one more mission. I sat in the middle of that empty living room for hours, not speaking, not moving. I didn't know who to call. I didn't even know what I would say. No one trains you for this. They train you to shoot, to lead, to survive. But not for what happens when the war is over and there's no one left waiting for you. I wasn't planning to go into the attic. I just needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like betrayal. The house I grew up in hadn't changed much since I left for boot camp, and maybe that's why it hurt more. It still looked like home, but the people inside had become strangers. I was searching for an old photo album when I found the box. It was tucked behind insulation, taped shut, and covered in dust thick enough to choke on. The kind of box someone hides, not stores. When I opened it, I saw a stack of envelopes, all addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My grandfather's. I froze. My grandpa died more than a decade ago. I'd always assumed he passed peacefully, said his goodbyes, and left this world, knowing we loved him. But these letters said otherwise. The dates spanned years. Some were written while I was deployed. Others, while I was in training. All of them were never delivered. Nami is on everyone. Sealed. Untouched. I sat down on the wooden floor, legs numb, and started reading. His first letter talked about the legacy of the family business. He said I was the only one with the values, the backbone, the grit to carry it forward. He called me a builder, a protector, not just in uniform, but in life. He believed in me. The next few letters were more urgent. He said he'd made me his legal heir, that he'd adjusted the documents and told my mother. He begged her to pass along the paperwork and call me, but she never did. She never said a word, not when he passed. Not during the funeral. Not once in all these years. And neither did my brother. My hands were shaking by the fifth letter. I could barely keep reading. Each sentence burned deeper than the last. He said he worried they would try to cut me out, that they didn't see me as part of the future, that they resented how much he admired me. And then, the final one, the one written just weeks before he died. It said the company was mine, that he trusted me with everything. All I had to do was come home and claim it. But I never got that chance. Because someone decided I didn't deserve to know. I looked down at that pile of letters and felt something I hadn't felt since I lost men under my command. A hollow anger. The kind that sits in your chest and expands slowly, quietly. My own mother, my own brother. People I would have taken bullets for. People who left me to fight wars abroad while they waged one against me at home. They didn't just steal a business. They stole a part of who I was. A part of who I could have been. And now that I knew the truth, there was no going back. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to reclaim what was mine, one truth at a time. I didn't recognize him at first. The man in the photo with my kids, smiling like he belonged there, holding my daughter like she was his own. My ex had posted it on her social media, like it was just another happy Sunday brunch. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe. Then I saw the name tagged in the post, Daniel Whitmore. It hit me like a punch. Daniel Whitmore wasn't just some new boyfriend. He was the acting CEO of Grayson Holdings, the same company my grandfather built from the ground up. The same company I was meant to inherit. My stomach turned. He wasn't just dating my ex-wife. He was embedding himself into my family's legacy, one move at a time. And I had no idea how long this had been going on. I started digging, pulled every file I could find, read every press release, every board announcement. The timeline didn't lie. He was appointed interim CEO just months after my grandfather passed. My mother's signature was all over the authorization forms, so was my brother's. That was the first wave of betrayal. But the second one came fast and hit harder. They were getting married, not next year, not someday. In 6 weeks, I found the announcement tucked quietly inside the society section of a local business magazine. My kids were going to be part of the ceremony. My ex-wife was marrying the man who took my place at the company, and my own family had helped make it happen. They'd handed him the throne while I was still bleeding out in the desert. It wasn't random, it was planned. The kind of move that doesn't happen overnight. The kind that takes coordination, approval, secrecy. I wasn't just forgotten, I was eliminated. Cut out cleanly, like I had never mattered. I kept staring at the wedding date, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. This wasn't about love, this was about power and control. I remembered my grandfather's words from one of the letters. He warned me there would be people who would see my loyalty as weakness, who would wait until I was too far away to fight back. I didn't want to believe that meant my own mother, my own blood. But the pieces were lining up, and they formed a picture I couldn't ignore anymore. I thought coming home would be the hardest part. But it turns out, home was where the real ambush waited. I was supposed to rebuild my life. Instead, I was staring down the wreckage of everything I'd trusted. My ex, my mother, my brother, and now this man, Daniel, who wore my title, sat at my desk and touched the life I helped build. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a hostile takeover, and they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I was too broken to fight back. They were wrong. The gala was held in one of those glass-walled hotels downtown. All sparkle and shallow smiles. I showed up in a clean suit, nothing flashy but sharp enough to blend in. I didn't RSVP. Didn't need to. I knew how these events worked. Walk in like you belong, and no one questions it. I kept to the edge of the room, scanning faces, sipping from a glass I barely touched. Then I saw him, Daniel Whitmore, laughing with donors, posing for photos with his hand at the small of my ex-wife's back. He looked polished, confident, the kind of man who's used to being the center of attention. He had no idea I was there. Not yet, and I wasn't about to give myself away so easily. I waited until he was alone, adjusting his cufflinks near the bar. I walked over calmly, introduced myself as just another former soldier in civilian life, looking to network. He extended a hand and smiled like a politician. The handshake was firm, but not stronger than mine. He asked me what unit I served with. I gave him a number and watched his eyes flicker. He didn't know the military. He was bluffing. Good, that gave me the edge. I asked about his work, let him brag. He talked about how he took over a legacy business and turned it around in just under 2 years. How the board trusted him. He had big growth plans. I nodded like I was impressed. Like I didn't already know every dirty signature on every document that put him in that chair. I asked about family. He said he was engaged to a wonderful woman, 2 amazing stepkids. He smiled when he said it. I smiled too, but mine didn't reach my eyes. For a moment, there was silence between us. He looked at me just a second too long. Like something was familiar, but he couldn't place it. I tilted my head and said, "You look like a man who always gets what he wants." He chuckled and said, "You have to know when to take your shot." I raised my glass to that. Inside, I was boiling. I wanted to hit him. Not physically, strategically. I wanted to watch his whole tower collapse brick by brick, but I couldn't rush it. Not here, not now. So I shook his hand again, told him I hoped we'd meet again soon. He said he was sure we would. He had no idea how true that was. As I walked away, I glanced over my shoulder. He was watching me now, like his instincts were catching up to the lie, like something about me didn't sit right. That was fine. Let him wonder. Let him get just uncomfortable enough to start making mistakes. Because the next time we met, I wouldn't be the man shaking hands. I'd be the one pulling the rug out from under him. Quietly, completely. It started with a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. My brother had left his phone on during a call, not realizing it was connected to my car's Bluetooth. I wasn't even trying to spy. I was just trying to breathe through another sleepless night when his voice filled the cabin. Then I heard my mother's, then Daniel's. They were planning a meeting, a private one, just the three of them. That was all I needed. I spent 2 days preparing. Borrowed a suit that still smelled like dry cleaner starch. Bought a pen off a surveillance site that recorded audio so clear you could hear someone blink. I rehearsed every word, every facial expression, until I could walk into that room and become invisible. I wasn't invited to the meeting. I wasn't supposed to know it existed, but I knew where they would be, and I knew how to get there first. The conference room on the 17th floor had glass walls and a long table that used to belong to my grandfather. I got in early, long before the others arrived. Slipped the pen between the cushions of a chair near the head of the table, tapped it once to start recording, then I left like a ghost. They came in an hour later. My brother was late, as usual. My mother looked tired, but focused. Daniel wore that same smug expression I remembered from the gala. I listened from down the hall, live, through an app on my phone. Every word cut like glass. They talked about finalizing paperwork to keep me out permanently. About how they'd waited until the will was sealed. About how my absence made things easier. My mother's voice broke once when she said she hoped I'd understand. Daniel reassured her that it was for the best. My brother made a joke about how I'd probably run off to join another war. They all laughed. And I stood there, jaw clenched, fingers gripping the phone so tight I thought it might crack. That was the moment I stopped being their son, their brother. I became something else. The board meeting was 3 days later. I walked in like I belonged there, which I did. My name was still on every founding document, every legacy memo, every shareholding clause. They looked surprised to see me, nervous, even, but no one said a word. Daniel was already talking when I stepped up to the table. Something about quarterly revenue and forward projections. I didn't wait. I pulled out a small speaker, placed it in the center, and pressed play. Silence. Then voices. Their voices. The room shifted. No one moved. No one breathed. I watched the color drain from my mother's face as her words echoed back at her. My brother looked like a man trying to remember how to lie. Daniel stood frozen, blinking too fast. The audio was crisp, unedited, raw. It spoke for itself. When the recording ended, I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply looked around the room and said, I am the rightful heir, and I'm taking it all back. The chairman didn't argue. The other board members sat in stunned quiet, then slowly began to nod. One by one, I laid out the letters from my grandfather, legal documentation that had been hidden. I showed copies of the audio, the timeline, and the signatures. It was airtight. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was mine. Because I had spent my life serving others, believing family meant loyalty. But they taught me the hard way that sometimes the only justice you'll ever get is the one you build with your own hands. As I walked out of that boardroom, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. Like I had finally stripped away every lie, every manipulation, every layer of silence that kept me from becoming the man my grandfather believed I was. They tried to erase me, but I made sure the truth had the last word. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted the truth to be seen. Once it was, I realized I had a choice to make. I could take them to court, drag every secret into the light, and watched their names burn, but I didn't. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because I didn't want to carry that weight anymore. I didn't press charges against my mother or my brother. I left the boardroom without saying another word to either of them. I had already said everything I needed to. From that day forward, we no longer existed in each other's lives. They were part of my past, not my future, and I was finally okay with that. The company didn't need another power-hungry leader. It needed a new purpose. So I made a decision. I restructured the organization, cut unnecessary spending, and funneled a third of our annual profits into a foundation that supported wounded veterans. We offered job training, mental health services, and housing assistance. Every time I walked into that office, I knew I was honoring my grandfather in the way he would have wanted, not through wealth, through service. My ex-wife reached out a few months later, said she regretted what happened. Those things had gotten complicated. She wanted to meet for coffee, to talk. I told her I wished her well, but I was focused on rebuilding the relationship that mattered most me and my kids. That door was closed, firmly. I got partial custody of my children. Weekends turned into weekdays. School pickups turned into late-night conversations. We planted a garden in the backyard, took road trips, built a new kind of life, one rooted in presence, not perfection. They didn't care about the company or the headlines. They just wanted their dad. And I showed up. People called what I did a comeback. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as a correction, a realignment of what should never have been stolen in the first place. I didn't get back at them. I got back to myself, and that's what mattered most. I still think about my grandfather sometimes, about what he saw in me that others tried to bury. His letters are framed now, hanging in my home office. A reminder that even in silence, the people who truly believe in you never stop speaking. I didn't take revenge. I took responsibility. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because I won, but because I refused to let bitterness define me. I found peace in the ashes and turned them into something worth living for.